I am Mallory Greaves, and I turned 21 the same day I got kicked out of my family. It was a warm Thursday. I remember because the sun had a kind of arrogance to it, like even the weather knew I was about to be humiliated. My mother, Bridget, had arranged the annual Greaves birthday brunch like she always did: white linens, stemless flutes, faux laughter. Except this time, it wasn't just a party. It was an ambush. "You're a grown woman now," my father, Douglas, said with the icy neutrality of someone delivering a corporate layoff. "It's time you stopped embarrassing this family." Embarrassing. That's what they called my scholarship to Parsons. That's what they called my freelance design clients. That's what they called the late nights I spent drawing instead of pretending to care about the hedge fund heir Dad wanted me to date. I never imagined my phone would ring at the perfect moment, buzzing on silent in my hoodie pocket, a name on the screen that would change everything. But before I tell you how my parents disowned me in front of a senator's wife, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. Back to the brunch. I hadn't even touched the grapefruit halves. The table was all manicured fingernails and beige silk. My mother's smile was tighter than her cheekbones. "Mallory's been experimenting," she said with a laugh. "Still playing with colors." I corrected her. "I'm a visual identity designer. I build brand systems." That was when the air changed. My dad set down his fork, wiped the corner of his mouth with the linen napkin, and looked at me the way someone might regard a pest in their cereal. Then came the speech, the one he'd clearly rehearsed, about the Greaves name, about legacy, about real careers and optics. They didn't even yell. That would have required passion. No, what they did was much colder. He told me my trust fund was frozen, that my tuition was my responsibility now, that they'd informed the family board I was no longer aligned with the values of the Greaves estate. "You're cutting me off because I won't be a puppet in pastel suits?" I asked, standing there in my Converse and thrifted denim jacket, the one with paint stains on the cuff. "We're helping you find clarity," Mom replied. "This tough love is necessary." Tough love. That's rich coming from a woman who schedules Botox between yoga and her PR firm meetings. The rest of the brunch unfolded around me like I was no longer there. Glasses clinked, someone complimented the quiche. I stood still for a moment longer, like an actor waiting for a curtain to fall. And then I left. I walked 5 blocks until I found a bench near the river. Pulled out my sketch pad, started tracing over an idea I'd had for a rebrand proposal. Something minimalist but bold, for a mid-sized cosmetics company that wanted to ditch its millennial pink. That's when the call came. Unknown number. But I knew who it was. I let it ring twice before answering. "This is Mallory," I said, trying not to let my voice shake. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Morgan Fairley, general counsel for a high-growth skincare startup. She said they were moving forward, that they loved my pitch, that they wanted to acquire the design framework I'd built, for 6 figures. I looked down at my sketch pad, still open to the first draft. Then I looked at the river, shining like nothing bad had happened at all. I wasn't lost. I was just finally free to build something on my own terms. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd been building in secret for years. Behind closed doors, under their noses. Between class projects and cafe shifts and sleepless nights in my apartment above the hardware store. And that's where the real story begins. I wasn't always invisible. I used to believe that if I tried hard enough, if I made my work good enough, precise enough, undeniable enough, they'd have to see me, they'd have to want to see me. But my family had this skill, this freakish ability, to look directly at you, while rendering you irrelevant. It started early. When my older brother Hal graduated from Exeter, the house was lit up like a wedding. Caterers, a jazz trio, my mother wore pearls and cried into her champagne flute. Dad gave a toast that ended with something about continuing the Greaves' legacy of excellence. When I got into the state-level art fair with my portrait series on working-class women, they sent a check to the school and told me to buy myself something nice. I did. A pack of Prismacolors and a copy of Steal Like an Artist. I was 15. Then there was my sister, Lee. She got a column in a student economics journal at Dartmouth, and my dad practically bought stock in the school. When I published an op-ed about visual literacy in Gen Z branding, he said, "That's cute, just Don't get political, okay? I wish I could say I didn't care, but I did. I cared so deeply it made my chest feel hollow. Every time my work won something, I'd walk into the kitchen holding the email, hoping someone would say, "Good job," or "You're really good at this." But someone always had bigger news. A cousin's engagement, Hal's internship with the mayor, Lee's semester in Oxford, and me? I was always creative. The way you'd call a toddler spirited after they set the curtains on fire. I remember one Thanksgiving when Uncle Trey asked what I wanted to do after college. I told him I was studying brand systems and digital identity theory. His reply, "So, like designing emojis?" That became my new family joke. Mallory makes emojis. Mom laughed the hardest. I started hiding my sketches after that. If they weren't going to take my work seriously, I wasn't going to hand them more ammunition. But my passion didn't shrink. It tunneled inward, became private and stubborn. I started waking up early, before school, worked in secret, sketched late into the night under lamplight, building mini brands for fake clients just to see if I could. I invented problems and solved them with color and font. Once, I took the hideous logo from a cousin's dog grooming business and rebuilt the entire visual language. Logo, typography, Instagram layout, even packaging design for shampoos. I sent it to him anonymously. 2 weeks later, he switched everything to the new look. Had no idea it was me. He called it a genius stroke of luck. I didn't correct him. Because if being quiet and useful was the only way to exist in the Greaves universe, I could do that. Until I could afford not to. The moment that broke me came the day I got offered an unpaid internship with a luxury design firm in the city. It was one of those we don't usually take students kind of places. Sleek walls, clean desks, people who wore only black and spoke in ideas, not trends. They liked my conceptual work on identity distortion in brand evolution. They even used words like fresh and grounded. I showed my parents the email. I waited. My mom frowned. "They won't pay you? Are you sure this isn't a scam?" Dad didn't even look up from his tablet. "Let me know when someone wants to hire you for real." It felt like walking through a ghost of myself. Like whatever version of Mallory they wanted me to be had long since died, and I was now this haunting presence, floating through their carefully arranged life. So I stopped trying. I stopped expecting them to care. And I started designing like I was the only one watching. Turns out, I was. And that was more than enough. The breakthrough happened one night in junior year, around 2 a.m., while I was still living in that shoebox apartment above Grange's Hardware. The radiator made a noise like it was dying a slow death, and I had duct taped the window shut to block the winter wind that always managed to sneak through. That night, I wasn't even working on a client piece. I was just playing. I had this idea. What if a brand didn't just look like its values but moved and breathed like them? What if you could feel integrity in motion graphics, trust in kerning, confidence in a gradient? So I built one, just to see. I invented a fake skincare line and crafted a full-blown identity around it. Sleek but earthy, luxe but transparent, something I would have bought in a heartbeat. I uploaded it to Behance under a pseudonym, just for fun, just to see if anyone noticed. 3 days later I got an email. "Hi MG," it read. "Would you be open to a collaboration? Your eye for modern minimalism is stunning." It was signed Devin Maddox, CEO Flinta Skincare. I googled her 3 times before I believed it. She was legit. Her brand had just been featured in Refinery 29 and Into the Gloss. I nearly dropped my coffee. We hopped on a call. I pretended to be older than I was. She didn't care. She wanted my eye. Said she didn't have time for agency fluff and designers who still think Helvetica is a personality. She wired half up front. That job paid for my next 2 months of rent. And that was just the beginning. Over the next 18 months, I took jobs under 3 aliases. I built clean brands for messy startups, did full visual identities for indie restaurants in Williamsburg, and even got approached by a small podcast network to redesign their entire show lineup. None of them knew my real age, none of them knew I was still using my college Wi-Fi, but they all kept coming back. I never marketed myself. I didn't even have a real portfolio, just whispers, referrals, and Dropbox folders with password protection. Everything I did ran through a burner LLC, Corvo Design Group. I even paid a friend of mine, Caleb, an actor who once played a barista on an insurance commercial, to take meetings for me as the client liaison. He He wore glasses he didn't need, and said things like visual equity and brand harmony, with such straight-faced conviction that people believed every word. We split commissions 90-10. By the time I turned 21, I had 4 steady retainer clients, 1 silent investor, and an NDA-protected merger offer waiting in my inbox. The company I'd built in the shadows was valued, unofficially of course, at just over $3.1 million, and no one in my family had the faintest clue. Not even Hal, who once told me to design a better outfit next time when I showed up to brunch in a sweatshirt with paint splatters on it. Not even Lee, who posted a story about Nippo babies who think they're visionaries, the same week I launched a full rebrand for a boutique hotel chain in Oregon. Not even my mother, who once said, "I'll start respecting your hobby when someone pays you to do it." They didn't respect me, but my clients did. They didn't see me as a lost daughter in rebellion, they saw me as a force. And truthfully, I liked it that way. The secrecy was a kind of armor. If they didn't know what I had built, they couldn't poison it with their expectations, or worse, their approval. I lived 2 lives. In one, I was the family disappointment, the artsy one who still hadn't figured it out, the black sheep, the brunch footnote. In the other, I was M.G. Corvo, head of a boutique identity agency with a client list worth more than my dad's golf club membership. And then the offer came. A fast-growing media tech firm, Nevra, wanted to buy my brand strategy engine, not just the design work. They wanted the back end, the automation flows, the behavior-based brand toolkit I'd built in Notion and Figma, and Sweat and Isolation. The number they quoted had 7 digits. The ink wasn't dry yet, but the direction was clear. My little ghost company was about to become very, very real. And of course, the offer arrived the week before the Greaves family's annual winter dinner. Perfect timing, right? I should have said no. I should have found an excuse, any excuse, to skip the annual Greaves family dinner. The worst part is no one really wants to go. Not even them. But they have to. It's tradition, image, ritualized suffering in 5 courses. This year it was being held at the Bellamy Club downtown. Leather banquettes, salt-crusted steak, the kind of place where the lights are always dim and the judgment is always bright. I'd RSVP'd with a tight right. Of course, looking forward. A lie. In truth, I'd been pacing for days. The Nevra deal was 96% done, just pending legal finalization. Morgan Fairley, their general counsel, said the contract was ready for signature next week. My stomach was a cocktail of adrenaline and nausea. I kept rereading the clause where my name, Mallory Greaves, was listed as the owner of Corvo Holdings, LLC. Part of me wanted to walk into the dinner wearing a ball gown made of contracts. Another part of me wanted to vanish into a ventilation shaft and resurface in some desert as a cactus farmer named Ray. Instead, I settled for a blazer I found in a thrift shop. Navy, slightly oversized, cinched at the waist. I paired it with Doc Martens and a charcoal turtleneck. My hair was pulled back low tight, no earrings, just focus. On the Uber ride over, I stared at the skyline and whispered, "Just get through it, smile, nod, don't let them rattle you." Easier said than done. As the car pulled up to Bellamy's, my phone buzzed. A text from Morgan, confirming Monday, 10 a.m. at our downtown office. Bring ID. Congrats again. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. 3 days. 3 days until the biggest deal of my life. And tonight, I had to pretend to be the girl who never made it. My family occupied a corner booth naturally. Lee was already half a martini deep, scrolling on her phone and laughing at something only she could see. Hal stood next to Dad, discussing some finance pitch like it was war strategy. Mom was adjusting her brooch and smiling at nothing in particular. When I walked in, no one looked up. I actually had to clear my throat. "Oh, Mallory," my mother said, air kissing me like I'd just stumbled in from a charity marathon. "You made it. You look artsy," Hal said, not even trying. I took my seat and kept my face smooth. I knew the script: pretend nothing is wrong, pretend you're honored to be here, pretend your seat wasn't almost an afterthought. We ordered, conversation drifted. Hal was launching something. Lee had been promoted. Dad was advising a boutique hedge, whatever that means. Every now and then someone would ask me something vague and safe like, "Still doing those creative things? Or any fun colors this year?" I smiled. I stirred my drink. I offered one-liners. I was a hologram of myself. When the waiter brought appetizers, I noticed Dad checking his watch. You know, Mallory, he said, voice slick with artificial charm, your mother and I were just talking about how much easier life is when everyone knows their role. Were you? I replied calmly, cutting into my burrata. He nodded. Some people contribute. Others explore. That was the thing about Greaves' dinners. No one ever stabbed you, they just handed you the knife and watched you figure it out. Exploration has value, I offered, keeping my tone light. All innovation starts as exploration, he chuckled. That's cute. I nearly laughed. Cute. Their favorite word when they couldn't understand something. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Morgan. FYI, never just emailed. PR embargo lifts Friday. Want to loop you into the media prep call tomorrow? I slid the phone face down. Lee glanced at it. Still glued to the gig apps, huh? I looked at her. Really looked. She was wearing a gold bracelet I'd mocked up for an NFT project 6 months ago. Didn't even know it had gone into production. And here she was, treating me like I was still pushing flyers at college campus events. It was unreal. But I didn't bite. Not yet. Because this wasn't my moment. Not yet. They'd earned the right to underestimate me. They'd practiced it for years. What they didn't know, what they were about to find out, was that the girl in the thrifted blazer and Doc Martens wasn't just a failed artist playing adult. She was a ghost with teeth. And she was about to haunt them with the truth. The first real blow came with the wine. It always does. By the time the sommelier had poured a vintage that probably cost more than my first laptop, the backhanded compliments had begun. They never hit you directly. No, the Greaves family preferred emotional paper cuts. Slow, steady, and barely visible until you bled. So, Mallory, said Uncle Robert, swirling his glass like a villain in a mid-budget thriller, what's new in the world of, was it sticker design? I smiled. Brand development, actually. He raised his eyebrows. Ah, right, fonts and colors, important stuff. Across the table, Aunt Vi giggled. She's always had such a flair. Remember that phase where she wanted to be a tattoo artist? I did not, in fact, want to be a tattoo artist. I was 13 and drew on my arms during art class. But sure, Vi, let's rewrite history. I laughed softly and took a sip of my drink. I wasn't going to correct them, I was past that. This wasn't a dinner, it was a sport, and the rule was simple, don't flinch. Next came the interrogations masked as interest. Any prospects? Lee asked, lips twitching with faux innocence. Relationship-wise, I mean, or are you still dating starving poets? I raised an eyebrow. Not everyone uses LinkedIn as a dating app, Lee. Mom snorted into her wine. Dad cut in with his signature follow-up. What about your career, Mallory? Still taking odd jobs? I hear Etsy is really picking up. That one stung, only because I knew he knew better. He'd seen my name in industry publications. Once, a colleague of his even complimented one of my brand redesigns at a conference, without realizing I was his daughter. He'd smiled politely, then changed the subject. Now he leaned back in his chair, all smooth authority. We only ask because we care. You're not a child anymore. It's time you thought about building something that lasts. I wanted to scream, I am. I've built something with more integrity than this entire table combined, but I didn't say that. I smiled again, just a little too wide. I'll be sure to let you know when I find something that lasts longer than your third assistant, Dad. A few chuckles, a few glares. Mostly silence. The table shifted, I could feel it. My presence wasn't amusing anymore. It was irritating. A blister they thought they could ignore, now starting to burn. Hal, ever the diplomat, tried to smooth it over. Well, not everyone needs to follow the same path, right? Some of us invest in companies, others paint them. The way he said it, others, like I was a breed apart. Something found under a rock. My fork scraped the edge of my plate. I thought about the digital rebrand I'd finished that morning for a fintech company twice the size of Hal's investment firm. They loved it, had even asked me to sit in on their internal leadership workshop to explain my design theory. Called me visionary. And yet here I was, being patted on the head like a kid with finger paints. I'm doing well, I said evenly, voice calm, deliberate. I'm proud of the work I've built. Mom's smile returned, soft and patronizing. Sweetheart, of course you are, but we're just saying, it might be time to think practically. There's still room in the family fund. We could help you pivot, maybe real estate, or interior styling. As if my career was a leaky boat they were offering to patch up, I clenched my jaw. No, thank you, I said, placing my napkin gently on the table. I'm not looking to pivot. Mallory, Dad said, now with that deeper, slower voice he used in boardrooms and interventions, no one's attacking you. We're just trying to help you see that dreams are fine when you're young, but you're not young anymore. I stared at him. You're right, I said. I'm not. That was the moment everything tilted. Because just then, as if summoned by the devil himself, the waiter approached our table, a folded envelope in hand. Miss Greaves? He asked. This was just delivered for you. I blinked. For me? He nodded and placed the envelope by my plate. The entire table went silent. Even Lee stopped mid-scroll. Inside was a simple card. It read, Morgan F. confirms Monday's closing. See you at 10. Congrats, CEO. Just 7 words. But to me they might as well have been fireworks. I slid the card into my bag without another word. My hands didn't even shake. They still had no idea what it meant, but they would. Soon. It was somewhere between the halibut and the hazelnut tart when my father made it official. The table had just fallen into that post-entree lull where everyone was full and drunk enough to get honest. Hal had pulled out his phone to check the markets, because of course he did. And Aunt V was going on about her new life coach, a man named Devon who wore crystals and didn't believe in eye contact. That's when Dad cleared his throat. Everyone quieted immediately. That's the thing about Douglas Greaves. When he speaks, people pause, even when he's wrong, especially when he's wrong. He lifted his glass. Family, he began. Legacy. Those are words we don't just say, we live by them. We build, we protect, we uphold, we evolve, yes, but we do not abandon what this family stands for. I saw where this was going before he took his next breath. He looked directly at me. It's with great difficulty and sadness that your mother and I have come to a decision. I set down my fork slowly. You've chosen a path that disregards the expectations and foundation of this family, he continued, voice still calm but with a cold undercurrent. And while we admire passion, we cannot support chaos disguised as independence. Lee's lips curled into a satisfied little smirk. Hal, for once, said nothing. You will no longer be included in family financial planning, Dad said. You've been removed from the Greaves Estate Trust. Your name will no longer appear in legacy investments, property disbursements, or legal protections granted to members of this household. He said it like a lawyer reading from a sheet. Practiced, sterile. It wasn't just being cut off, it was exile. Douglas, my mother interjected, touching his arm gently, like she always did when she wanted to seem softer. We still love you, darling. This isn't personal. Of course not. Just financial dismemberment on a silver plate. My stomach twisted, not from sadness, but from the sheer, mind-bending absurdity. I watched them, these people in tailored suits and $700 shoes, congratulating themselves for being brave enough to disown their daughter in the name of standards. They expected tears. They expected a scene. They expected me to crumble like a broken trust fund Barbie. Instead, not because I was okay, but because I knew something they didn't. I leaned forward, elbows on the linen tablecloth, and looked at each of them, one by one. I appreciate the clarity, I said. Hal blinked. Lee frowned. Dad narrowed his eyes. You're taking this well, he said. Oh, I've already had practice, I replied. You disowned me a long time ago. Tonight's just the paperwork. The silence was thick enough to slice. But don't worry, I continued. I won't embarrass the family by asking for help. I've been building something of my own for quite a while. Dad scoffed. What, a sticker business? I let that one sit there for a moment. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I opened the investor PDF Morgan had sent just yesterday. It was clean, precise, and loaded with numbers that would make Hal salivate. I tapped twice and turned the screen toward them. This is Corvo, I said. It's a design tech engine, built from scratch, valued at 8 figures. Lee squinted. Is this real? It is, I said, and come Monday it won't just be mine, it'll be public. There's a press release scheduled, you'll see it on Bloomberg. For a second, no one said anything. Then Hal let out a sharp, involuntary laugh. You're bluffing. I'm not, I said, and when the announcement hits, your investors will know it too. Dad looked like he was buffering, processing and refusing to believe it at the same time. You did this behind our backs? Mom whispered. I did it without your permission, I corrected, which, to this family, is apparently the same thing. I stood. I'll see myself out. Mallory, Lee started, but I didn't wait. I walked past their stunned faces, past the waiter frozen mid-pour, past the heavy double doors of Bellamy's. I stepped out into the cold, clean night, and I exhaled. Not because it was over, but because I had ended it. They wanted to disown me? They were too late. The air outside was sharper than I expected. I stood on the curb of Lexington Avenue, blazer whipping slightly in the wind, blinking against the sheer absurdity of what had just happened. Somewhere behind me, the Greaves dinner party had probably resumed like nothing happened. Lee was probably already reframing the story into something that made her look noble. Hal would be dissecting my emotional instability over digestives. My mother would be quietly wiping under her eyes, saying, "She's just so lost." But I wasn't lost, I was free. My phone buzzed again. For a second I thought it might be Morgan or Devin or even one of my clients, but it was a number I didn't recognize, West Coast area code. I answered anyway. "Hello?" A pause. Then, "Is this Mallory Greaves of Corvo Design?" Something in the voice, eager but hesitant, made me straighten my spine. "This is she. This is Jessa Elbridge, VP of Strategy over at Nevra," she said quickly. "I know you've been working with Morgan on the acquisition side. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time?" I almost laughed. "Oh, Jessa, you have no idea. Now's perfect." "Well," she continued, excitement building in her tone, "we just wrapped an internal call. We're fast-tracking your press coordination. Our CEO is hosting a live strategy Q&A Monday afternoon, and we want you on it. Front and center. We want the world to see who built Corvo." My throat caught for a second. "Me? On camera?" she chuckled. "You're about to become a symbol of what design-first leadership looks like. This is your moment, Mallory. Lean into it." I could feel the weight of the cold start to lift, or maybe it was just heat rising in my chest. "Absolutely," I said. "Send me the briefing. I'll be ready." As I hung up, I stared down at my phone. My reflection on the screen looked unfamiliar, blazer still crisp, jaw set hard, eyes sharper than they'd ever been. That was when I noticed a string of messages lighting up in the group chat I shared with my 3 closest friends from school: Remy, Danny, and Jules. "Remy, girl, your name is trending on design Twitter. Is that your Corvo?" "Danny, how did you not tell us you were closing with Nevra?" "Wait, they just posted the teaser image on their homepage. Is that your logo redesign on the splash screen?" I opened the site. There it was, a glowing, animated loop of the Corvo insignia I'd designed in my sweatpants 2 years ago, now sitting proudly at the top of a company poised to go public. Right under it, in bold serif text, "Designed by Mallory Greaves. Not MG, not anonymous visual strategist, my name." In full. It was surreal, like walking into a dream I didn't even know I dared to have. I called Remy. "Oh my God," she answered, breathless. "You're literally famous now. What happened? Where are you?" I told her everything. The dinner, the exile, the envelope, the call. The silence on her end lasted 3 seconds. Then, "You're coming here, right now. No arguments." "Remy, it's late, and I'm emotionally." "Mallory, you just detonated the Greaves family dinner and then answered a call that launched you into the national spotlight. You need champagne, you need hugs, you need us." She was right. 10 minutes later, I was in an Uber headed to their apartment. They greeted me like I'd just returned from war. Remy in fuzzy socks and eyeliner. Danny with 3 glasses of Prosecco already poured. Jules holding up a hoodie that read "Self-made or nothing." "I'm so proud of you," Danny whispered as she hugged me, mascara already smudging. "I knew you were cooking something," Jules said, looping an arm around me. "But I didn't know it was a damn empire." We stayed up until 3 a.m., drinking, crying, laughing so hard my stomach hurt. They let me collapse on the couch in a pile of throw blankets in relief. That night I realized something. The most important room you'll ever walk into isn't filled with legacy. It's filled with people who see you, even when no one else does. By Monday morning, the world knew. The press release dropped at 9 a.m. sharp, accompanied by an industry blog interview, a teaser video featuring my work, and a social media blitz that tagged me across every platform. Corvo Design Group acquired by Nevra for undisclosed 8-figure deal. Founder Mallory Greaves hailed as next-gen design leader. I sat in the lobby of Nevra's downtown office, palms sweating slightly against the cool ceramic cup of coffee they'd handed me, watching my name crawl across a ticker on a muted financial news screen. It felt like standing in my own reflection, trying to decide if I believed it. 10 minutes later, Morgan Fairley, razor-sharp in a slate-gray suit and with the kind of posture that could command a courtroom, swept through the glass doors and extended a hand. "You ready for this, CEO?" I shook her hand. "I was born ready." She grinned. "That's what I like to hear." The signing took all of 20 minutes. 5 pens, 3 documents, 1 moment that rewrote the course of my life. We stood and posed for a photo afterward. Someone joked about needing a better lighting setup for LinkedIn. I cracked a real smile. It felt earned. But the most gratifying moment came later that evening when my inbox began filling with names I hadn't seen in years. Subject: proud of you. From Lee Greaves. Message: just saw the news. Wow. I didn't realize you were doing so well. Maybe we could catch up soon? Miss you. Subject: no hard feelings. From Douglas Greaves. Message: I suppose I underestimated you. Let's talk sometime. Family should stick together. And the best one? Subject: Greaves Family Annual Newsletter Addendum Request from Bridget Greaves. Message: would you be comfortable if we included your recent achievement in the family newsletter? It would be a nice touch of diversity. I didn't reply. Not right away. Instead, I took a walk to my favorite bakery, one of those corner places with uneven floors and cinnamon that hits like a memory. I ordered a croissant and a matcha latte, then sat by the window with my sketchbook open, and I let myself feel it. The power, the peace, the choice. They didn't get to spin this, not anymore. Later that night, I finally responded to all 3. To Lee: appreciate the message. I'm very busy this month. Let's reconnect another time. To my father: no hard feelings here. I'm just focused on building forward. To my mother: thank you for reaching out. At this time, I prefer not to be included in any Greaves publications. I'm establishing my own narrative. That one felt especially good. But I didn't stop there. The next day I posted a thread. What happens when you build in silence while they doubt you out loud? I told the whole story. Not the dramatic dinner, not the exile, but the years of dismissal, the late nights, the ghost work, the grit. I tagged no one, just let the truth stand bare. By morning, it had gone viral. Thousands of retweets, DMs from young designers, emails from students, requests for interviews, keynotes, mentorship, and in the middle of it all, one quiet message stood out. From Mia Corwell. Subject: thank you. Hi Mallory, I'm a 19-year-old art student whose parents also think my work is useless. I was going to quit this week, but then I saw your post. I changed my mind. Thank you for showing me that quiet kids can win too. I stared at it for a long time. That was the moment I realized the real power of my success. Not in the money, not in the headlines, but in the disruption. The quiet rebellion that lets someone else believe they don't have to change who they are to be enough. And that was worth everything. 3 days later, I found myself curled on Remi's thrifted velvet couch, eating leftover pad thai out of a takeout box with a pencil stuck in my messy bun. The television was on but muted, just background flicker and white noise. Around me, the people who actually mattered lounged like they belonged to the room, comfortably, entirely, without masks. Danny was in her usual corner, half asleep under a weighted blanket, mumbling critiques of the typeface used in a new eco-brand ad. Jules was cross-legged on the rug, designing stickers for a queer bookstore pop-up. And Remi? She was next to me, editing photos from her last shoot while humming off-key to some indie track only she could love. None of them asked how the press was going, or what my next deal looked like, or if I'd thought about monetizing my momentum. Instead, they asked what kind of croissants I wanted for breakfast. It was jarring in the best way, because for the first time in years, I was surrounded by people who didn't see me as a strategic pawn, a legacy liability, or a glitter-covered inconvenience. They saw me. Just me. You gonna do the interview with Fast Company? Jules asked later that night. I shrugged. Maybe. Still deciding. Remi leaned over and smirked. Power move. Deny the press even after the press confirms you're a legend. We laughed. It wasn't performative. It was real. The kind of laughter that lives in your ribs. We stayed up way too late again, talking about nothing and everything. Childhood nicknames, favorite fonts, weird dreams we'd had the week before. At one point, Danny admitted she'd been scared I'd outgrow them now that I was, basically, art Beyoncé. I reached across the pile of blankets and smacked her with a pillow. Please, I'm still using your Netflix login. But deep down, I understood her fear, because I had outgrown some things. I just refused to outgrow them. The next morning I hosted brunch in my own place for the first time ever. A quiet rooftop garden I'd been renting in a converted brownstone. Nothing fancy, just big windows, too many plants, and a mismatched table set from a vintage warehouse in Queens. I made pancakes, burned half of them. We ate them anyway. There was no staff, no press, no manipulation wrapped in polished smiles, just mismatched plates and real joy. Halfway through coffee refills, Jules paused and said, "You know what this reminds me of?" "What?" "That family dinner scene in the Royal Tenenbaums, but if it ended well and no one was a raging narcissist." I choked on my coffee. Wow, high praise. "I'm serious," she said. "This is the good timeline." I looked around the table. The crumbs, the inside jokes, the lack of performance. This was the good timeline. Later, as they left one by one, hugging me too hard, promising to come back for Sunday waffles, I stood at the door and watched the elevator close. And I realized something I hadn't been able to admit before. The blood you're born into doesn't determine your family. The ones who choose you, who stay when you're messy, who believe in your brilliance, even when you doubt it, those are the people worth building a life with. That night, I wrote a letter I never planned to send. To my parents. Just for myself. It said, "You cast me out to protect your image, but in doing so, you freed me from it. I hope someday you find peace in truth, but I'm not waiting around for it." I folded the paper and tucked it into the back of my sketchbook. A quiet full stop. Then I turned the page and began to draw. A brand concept, just for fun. No brief, no client, no performance. Just creation, for the joy of it. After the press dust settled, the quiet surprised me. Not the kind of silence that follows rejection. This was the kind that hummed with intent. A stillness I hadn't realized I craved. No more double lives. No more tiptoeing between who I was and who I was expected to be. Just air. Breathable, honest air. But peace, I discovered, didn't come without boundaries. That was the first lesson. Because the moment I started living openly as Mallory Greaves, founder of Corvo, the invitations came pouring in. Not just from press outlets or venture panels, but from people I thought I'd left behind. Lee tagged me in a #girlboss post about breaking the mold. Hal sent a passive-aggressive Venmo request for the dinner he paid for 3 Christmases ago. And my father? He emailed asking if I'd be open to consulting on a rebrand of the Greaves Foundation's public image. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened a blank Notion doc and titled it, "Rules of Engagement, Post-Legacy Era." It was half joke, half manifesto. I wrote things like, "You are not obligated to attend any event where you are the token success story. You do not have to return to the table that once mocked your hunger. You are not required to explain your boundaries to people who never respected your margins." Then I turned them into actual boundaries. I got a new number, a new email. A lawyer, not for protection, but for clarity. I had Danny draft me a brand release clause. No use of my name, image, or quotes by the Greaves family without written consent. Ever. Then I sent it as a response to my mother's newsletter request. She didn't reply, but she read it. I could feel it. I wasn't angry anymore, just uninterested. That was the second lesson. There's a special kind of freedom that comes from no longer needing to prove yourself to the people who refuse to see you. Instead, I poured my energy into things that felt like me. I hosted my first design masterclass online. Didn't charge a cent. I wanted to reach people like Mia Corwell, the girl who almost gave up. The response? Overwhelming. Thousands signed up. Some wrote essays, others just said thank you. But the impact? That stayed with me. I launched a microgrant initiative through Corvo. $5,000 no-strings-attached awards for independent designers from underrepresented communities. First cohort, 10 grants, all funded through a licensing deal I signed for one of my older brand toolkits. The Greaves family had their estate fund. I had something better, a living legacy. One night, around 2 a.m., I got a voicemail from Aunt Vi. She sounded tipsy and emotional. "Sweetheart, we didn't know. Your mom, well, she's a mess. Douglas is, well, you know him, but me? I'm proud of you, even if I don't get what a design engine is." I saved it, didn't reply. I no longer felt the compulsion to forgive for sport. I'd already built the fortress. I was simply choosing who could enter. Only those who knocked with humility, not demand. I even updated the title on my website. Not CEO, not founder. Just Mallory Greaves. designer, builder, human. Because in the space I had built digitally, emotionally, legally, I had finally carved out something they couldn't touch. My name, my voice, my terms. I was no longer just the outcast. I was the architect, and that made all the difference. The first time I saw the Greaves name on a scholarship application, I laughed out loud. It was surreal, seeing it printed there in bold serif type on the masthead of something I created. Not a wine label, not a charity auction program, not some glossy magazine write-up paid for in quiet favors, but a real, functional grant program with reach, substance, and teeth. The Greaves Independent Arts Initiative. I launched it 6 weeks after the acquisition closed. Fully funded, legally registered, and publicly unaffiliated with the legacy Greaves estate. But I kept the name, that name, for a reason. Because they didn't get to define it anymore. I did. Each quarter we selected 10 recipients. Visual artists, freelance illustrators, animators, motion designers, people whose portfolios pulsed with brilliance but whose inboxes were filled with rejection. I'd seen those inboxes. I'd lived them. Now I got to flip the script. We sent out our first batch of award letters with care. Handwritten notes, physical packets, a little silver pin embossed with the Corvo insignia and the words, "We see you." That phrase became our unofficial motto, and the more we gave, the more we received. An animator in St. Louis used her grant to rent studio space and hire a sound designer for her short film. A queer artist from Miami launched a zine series spotlighting trans designers of color. A kid from Nova Scotia built a full VR gallery out of a makeshift garage. They sent us pictures, videos, postcards. They didn't know the full story behind the name. But I did. And every time I saw it, Greaves, attached to something true, something that actually meant something, I felt this quiet, slow-burning satisfaction settle behind my ribs. I wasn't erasing my past, I was reclaiming it. That was the third lesson. Legacy is not what you inherit, it's what you make endurable. One afternoon, while setting up a presentation for a university guest lecture, a student raised her hand during Q&A. "Why keep the name?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Why not distance yourself completely?" I smiled. "Because I don't believe in surrendering language to people who misuse it," I said. "They spent years turning that name into a weapon. I'm turning it into a welcome mat." The room went quiet, and then someone started clapping. It spread slowly, awkwardly, but it grew. That night, I got an email from the university's arts department head asking if I'd consider an honorary mentorship role. "You have no idea how much your story shook them," she wrote. I read the message 3 times. Then I called Jules. "I think I might actually be inspiring people," I told her. "You are," she said, "and you're not even trying. That's the scary part." We ended the call laughing, but as I stared at my ceiling afterward, I realized she was right. I wasn't pushing anymore. I wasn't scrapping for oxygen in rooms where I wasn't wanted. I was planting things, and they were growing. In time, word reached the Greaves family. Not from me, from Forbes, from students, from alumni networks that whispered and re-shared and asked, "Is she related to those Greaves?" By the time my mother sent a clipped email, "We're happy you've found a meaningful path," I didn't even feel the need to respond. She didn't need me to answer. She just needed to know if the world had forgiven me more quickly than she had. Spoiler, it had. And I'd forgiven myself far earlier. Because forgiveness wasn't the goal anymore. Building was. And I had so much more to build. I didn't plan on going back to the beach house. It had always been my mother's favorite. A clean, sterile monument to coastal elegance with white shutters, overpriced teak furniture, and a strict no sand inside policy that made the whole point of a beach house laughable. But one early morning in late September, I found myself standing outside the gate. The house was empty. Off-season. Quiet. I had borrowed the key from an old property manager who used to sneak me pastries when I was a kid. Said it was still technically listed under a Greaves holding company, but hadn't been used in months, so I let myself in. It felt like walking into a memory, but one that had stopped breathing. The same photos were on the wall. Hal's framed Harvard diploma, Lee's portrait from her internship at the embassy, and in the hallway corner, a single small frame with my 5th grade certificate of most artistic, crooked, faded, like even the wall had forgotten me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I walked straight to the back porch, kicked off my boots, and sat cross-legged on the deck facing the ocean. I pulled out my sketch pad, now more weathered than the boards beneath me, and began to draw. No client, no strategy, just lines and light. I sketched the curve of the shoreline, the way the morning sun dissolved into foam, the crooked wooden dock that had once given me splinters when I was 8. It didn't feel like taking something back. It felt like letting it go. The fourth and final lesson. Self-worth isn't built in opposition to others. It's built in the quiet moments where you finally believe you never needed their permission in the first place. I sat there until dusk, sketching, watching, breathing. No calls, no press, no obligations. Just me, present, whole. Eventually I stood and walked inside. Before I left, I removed the crooked, most artistic certificate from the hallway wall, tucked it in my bag, replaced it with a note I wrote on the back of a receipt. It read, "She grew, not because of you, but in spite of you, and she's just getting started." Then I locked the door behind me and walked away without looking back. As I reached the edge of the dunes, I felt it. Not triumph, not even closure, but clarity. For years I'd been orbiting their world trying to prove I belonged inside it. Now I had my own, and it didn't need gates or approval or headlines. It just needed space to keep growing. Have you ever been made to feel like your dreams weren't valid just because they didn't fit someone else's mold? I know I'm not the only one. Maybe your family told you your art wasn't practical. Maybe your friends rolled their eyes when you shared your startup idea. Or maybe someone close to you looked you straight in the eye and said, "You'll never make it." If that's ever been you, this story is for you. Because the truth is, success doesn't come with a pre-approved stamp. It's not handed out by people in boardrooms or defined by family brunches. It's something you define. It's something you build, even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. So tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from something that no longer saw your worth? What did it teach you? Who did you become on the other side? I want to hear your stories.